1862, Part 2, Major Legislature. That should probably be Major Legislation. I don't know. I'm going to play a little bit of music and then I'm going to jump into it. Thanks for joining. Oh, I kind of delayed on that one. I got to try that again. Yeah, I actually like that. Third time's a charm. Continuing discussion on this major Supreme Court case that is what is under review today. Byron Allen brought a major awareness to it. It's important to understand the Civil Rights Bill, but it's also, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, but it's also important to know what laid that premise. So again, this is part 2. Part 1, we covered some of the major acts, including that Revenue Act of 1861, looking at the Confiscation Act, the Anti-Coolie Act in its relation to the railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad Act. Told you why those were important. Check out part 1, but this is part 2, where we're going to be taking a deeper dive. And you know what else I need right now? As promised, the music. There it is. On this live stream, I figured that it would be important to break down this District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. Now, you'll often hear it referred to as when Lincoln paid the slave owners. We back, DJ, and you know it, man. We got to get this content out, why it's important. That way we have that track record established. We can refer people to it when we're having deeper context, maybe even some reparations discussions a bit later. Well, Miss Chocolate, thanks for joining again. So always love to shout y'all out. Thanks for coming. But if I don't shout you out while I'm in the middle of it, remember I do oftentimes turn off the live stream, the chat stream, just so I can focus on the information. So charge it to my heart, or charge it to my head, not my heart, excuse me. But thanks for rocking. This one's important to me, man. This District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. Definitely a big one here, so give it some time and let it saturate. Let me show you definitely one of the things that I want to do. And you know what? I think I'm actually just going to leave that music in the hindsight. Hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. So even before we get into that legislation, let's take a look. Let's take a real deep dive. See, as we recognize here, that transatlantic slave trade, all of this land is important. All of this land is important. All of this land is important from a global lens. All of this land is important from a global lens, especially when you're trying to recreate that story of the African diaspora, the African descendant of Americans, American descendant of slavery. Consciousness and House of Consciousness, Sinetta, shout out that guy. Much of that debate that they were discussing yesterday, not yesterday, but Sunday, I believe it was. Yeah, maybe it happened before that, though, because I saw it first on Patreon. But Sinetta, House of Consciousness, had 2 debaters on, Zion Lex and Rob Bourne, and they were talking about the origins of Hebrew Israelites in the Americas, the Caribbean, and West Africa. Now, the conversation did pivot and track all the way back more than 10,000 years. So, of course, it also included Kemet, or all the way over here on this side of this flat plane. But as we look here, this is what they were referring to as the West Africa and all the difference from the north to the south. So definitely we know that the conversations are multi-channel conversations. We're pretty much saying the same thing. We definitely know how much of an impact that African has had in these areas. Absolutely. You can see it all along those coasts, sometimes even penetrating deeper inward. These ones are good, though. We'll give it some time to catch up and keep up. Hopefully it is able to, but yeah, it'd be tripping. Well, we can get a phenomenal view of the Bahamas. It rips through all the blueness when you're looking at the Bahamas. Looks like the Bahamas is designed for a heavenly view. All right, so as we make our way up these mountains in the water, is find our way up the coast with the Spanish and Portuguese and such. That's the direction you want to move in. All right, so with that, we're going to take this interactive tour, and we're going to take that look. We're going to be guided by the drinking gourd. I mean, unless you don't want to. I mean, because I know there's different conversations one could be having about the Kardashians and that and the fourth, but this area that you see that's highlighted, it seems like it's from Wilmington and Myrtle Beach, but it actually starts about here and moves all the way down. But the actual reserve, the Sherman Reserve, is right here on the horizon. If you can just make it there from the Bahamas, if you can just make it there, that was the most major port. This straight shot, this beautiful straight shot. I'm gonna have to grab that one. Appreciate anybody that's rocking with me live again. But we got to follow the drinking gourd like our ancestors, and just because we have technology don't make us any less responsible for what we're supposed to be doing, and that's deliver content, make the world a little bit easier on the next generation. If there are any who find themselves situated in the Bahamas and they need an actual map of what that world looked like, but they don't have a map and no technology's working, and all they can do is look up for the drinking gourd. Where can they go? How do they get back home? Which way is actually north? This content provided by Brother Moses, the B1 Network. Remember, we're going to talk about the District of Columbia Emancipation Act and why that's important. Let me go on and say this joint right here. This B1 content is critical, so I'm going to go on and save that right now. Let me do it one more time. Yeah, that's a good one right there, Brody. So where you want to go? You could take a trip anywhere you want to go. Brother Mo will probably go to Jamaica. So I would have to back out a little bit. So that's as far back as I would have to go. Like walking on dry land. Can you see it? Can you see it? Yeah, bro, I'm gonna need that one too, so. Give me a second. See, because we got work to do. Got to follow that drinking gourd. Well, need that one too, bro. I especially like this one because it also includes Jamaica. And if you look on the bottom far right, you got the longitude and latitude as well, which is something that can actually be punched in. So, won't he do it? You're taking boat trips and trying to be yacht boys and doing all of that shit, getting jet skis and getting out there. Boy, you don't know how to drop a red beacon for yourself. That is crazy, the names though. Manzanillo, Palmarito, Palma Soriano, Santiago de Cuba, Cuernavaca, Mayaré, Ceje de Tanamo. Yeah, that one, I would struggle with that one. That's huge. Ocho Rios, Runaway Bay, Port Antonio, Spanish Town, Mandeville, Montego. So the names of those ones are a little easier. Matanzas, Cienfuegos, Santa Clara, Fort Myers, Fort Lauderdale. So some major forts that were established early on. Augustine is there too. West Palm Beach, or you can get to Miami. You want to get to Key West, that's just hell of water you're traveling, but it's almost like if you're trying to go Louisiana, maybe Alabama, something, Newport, Nassau, Harperstown, Guantanamo Bay. Moron. You say, why is that important? Oh, they ain't gonna like that one. Oh well, fucking, it's already out there. Oh, I guess shows damn near the exact grid coordinates for Guantanamo. It'll come into view for you in a little bit, but it's starting to zoom in and getting its bearings together. It's not as easy working in satellite view as it is with a Go, whatever you call it, a Waves app or something that does it for you. That is a gorgeous picture right there. I actually like it just as it is. I'm gonna take that one too. Yeah, that's pretty dope. All right, that's enough of that music stuff. Hopefully that music therapy is actually helpful. I definitely enjoy it. Bringing a visual aid or a visual element that's more calming, more soothing, allow your eyes to relax, allow your senses to be restored as we get back into this information. So the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act. So compensated emancipation. Those are the key words in this bill or in this piece of major legislation. The compensated emancipation. And why is that important, right? Because it is the payments that were made to those large owners at the time. Let's see. We got Brother Kenny, appreciate it. CRU, appreciate it. I'm gonna have to actually too. All right, here we go. Where do I actually even want to start on this one? So as I look by, many people see the Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a good consolidation of information because it has the sources that are at the very bottom. If you decide that you want to do even deeper information that you're actually studying or researching. In this case, we're trying to gear up for a Reconstruction conversation, and you can talk about the white supremacist terrorism from a lens of what Reconstruction was. You can talk about the police, and you can talk about any of those other major adjacencies, but you first have to establish the premise, right, that these are freed men. This was recognized that they were human beings, and from there you moved on to different legislations that then said, you know, they have the right to contracts, enter and exit from contracts freely. There was a lot of labor that was being offered, even in the forms of the military. There was a lot, you know, they were contraband considered as legislation. So thus joining the side of the North and then being able to walk behind or clean up after or do whatever it was that major war effort. Walking behind, for example, General Sherman and even his conviction, he determined that the Sherman Reservation, which is the premise of the 40 acres and 40 acres and a mule argument, that Sherman Reservation. From there, that contributes to the law, the tariffs, the different things that were also going on, the Railroad Act. We're going to be building this massive investment infrastructure spending, and we're going to be appointing livelihoods even to those citizens and those who can benefit from citizenship. And African Americans were among those numbers. And being able to track and find that information and show that legacy or that blueprint, that established effort and that established contribution, but to also be able to look at the banking and look at the unfair, the marginalized labor or the reduced rate that they were paid for so long. You're establishing this track record generation after generation to when you're asking for a check that is enormous as $22 trillion, you're able to actually and legitimately justify it with actual records. And that is the intent. The intent is to establish that claim that is really based on facts. It is really based on facts. And in order to do so, we have to know the different legislation and the different pieces that point us or gear us to that direction. That's just research, and there's nothing else that will actually do. If you're going to play the political game, if you're going to do the politics, this is a necessary thing. And whether you think that it already exists and you're just asking for them to produce the numbers, or you're actually telling the Black folks who are of this generation doing work inside of universities, no, I know you're focusing on anthropology. That's good. But there's anthropology in the South that can be resurrecting these mass graves. I know you're focusing on biology and stem cell research and genealogy and lineage and things. I know you're focusing on mathematics and accounting. There are degrees of accounting that can actually be serving of this same case, the one that established your $22 trillion claim. Because as you'll notice in this legislation, they are making claims through their legislation. They're making claims to property. They're making claims to investment. They're making claims to infrastructure. They're making claims to people. And in that same sense, these are owners. And so who do I speak to? I speak to the ownership class. I speak to those who are in that position of investment. And right now, we know that those people are B1. They are dealing with a conflicted energy, but yet they are on that premise of B1. Have to talk to them because they are in that position to make a decision. Right now, we're looking at this from a lens of reparations. People can say, yeah, we are owed. But now the argument is still, what are we owed and how do you compensate for it? If that conversation does not progress towards things like meaningful and impactful legislation, such as a Federal Reserve or something like that, note, act, U.S. Treasury or the bill, the actual printing of a damn piece of paper the monetization of it that can equally be distributed, something along those lines. If that's not what you're asking for, then I don't know what you're asking for. You see here, February 25th, 1862, you needed a legal tender. And the legal tender, as you can see here, that 3 cent, and that was what you were paying people or distributing to people. You asked for $22 trillion. Let's give an example. Right here, the Transcontinental Railroad by act of Congress, July 1st, 1861. Now let's make that modern. What about the modern railway? So they invented it there, and they showed that it was of impact, the Industrial Revolution and all of that, creating jobs through legislation. Today, the super railway that goes like 150 miles per hour or something like that, maybe even faster. I know people say there's planes already, but that doesn't have our name on it. People say that there are roads already, and that doesn't have our name on it. Our legacy stamp in our generation is to always keep going forward, and an iconic symbol like a speed railway is thinking China. That is thinking Chinese. That is thinking real coolie. And in this case, it's thinking anti-coolie. It's thinking, what can we do today, and what can we do using the labor force that is currently available, and using the justification that we have already established through precedent. This is establishing historical precedent even for how reparations themselves are of a benefit to America, not just saying it's a black thing, or reparations meaning, well, I don't owe you, and that was the prior generation. Look, you're going to continue to pay taxes anyway. What would you rather pay taxes on? I tell you, there are two major pieces of legislation that I would be for without any question. Number one is the marijuana, or the marijuana industry takeover, allowing that, all the confiscation, the anti-coolie, the legal tender resurrection enactments, the Homestead Act for all the land that's needed, Pacific Railway Act, or even in our generation, that would be something along the lines of the Intercommerce Law or something like that. Moral Land Grant Colleges Act, so something that allows that partnership, some of our land, to be designated towards the HBCUs in the cultivation of finding those similar products. And that model, it exists in California as well, looking at institutions like UC Davis. Moving forward into the Military Act, or the Militia Act of 1862. Now that one is somebody else's big takeaway. If they want to push for more military spending, I think we do a lot for African-American soldiers already. And so I know that legislation is most likely to be there regardless. You'll probably find something in 2020 that you can vote on regarding our military. The National Banking Act would be another one. So all of these in concert create that premise of a reparations claim, or a payment, a property allocation, a distribution of American resources. And it was the distribution of American resources that have names on them. Entire families have benefited to this day from this type of major legislation. And so what I'm saying is, we need that major type of legislation to be pushed by the ADOS, not just the reparations talking point, but what do you want on the actual ballot? What does major legislation look like from the lens of ADOS? That would be my challenge to the Yvette Carnells and the Tone Talks. Now, we have the data that justifies why it's important in modern and contemporary times, and they're doing a hell of a job bringing out that data on their platform. I think that the contribution is not that I challenge them to do it, but like I'm doing today, actually presenting that information, actually doing that research and that homework. So I'm complimentary to that conversation by actually bringing out a major blueprint for economic success based on the exact period that they're talking about. And that's not just how you win a debate. Remember, when you're looking at the Confiscation Act and all of these acts, they are from the lens of a debate, something that some man brought to the House, and the House determined, and they brought through Senate meetings and the Senate and judiciary meetings, and it had to be ruled on by that legislative body, or that House, or however you look at it. And so it was a debate. You had people who were for it, you had people who were against it. But that's what we have right now when you're having reparations conversations. You're having the opportunity to engage in public discourse and sentiment on reparations as an economic driver for 22nd century success. All right. And so even though that argument is based on this 19th century concept and this 37th United States Congress blueprint, it still has ramifications today. And so that's why I'm most proud of the Byron Allen bringing out the 1866 Civil Rights and bringing that to the forefront, driving some awareness there. My contribution is to take deep dives on information such as what you're seeing today. This major legislation, the District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act, is not to be looked over when we're considering what that looks like. So essentially reparations for those major owners at the time. Again, eminent domain is a thing that's also relevant here. So if you're going to be taking somebody's land in order to build that pipeline, you have to know that that's going to be in the debate, which is why you bring it out. The Confiscation Act of 1861, that's why you bring it out, because their argument will be, well, in order to create that super highway like California had once put on the ballot, but the national level super highway, just like similar, there could be a super highway, or I was looking, a super highway connecting, points in Canada all the way down through South America even. So a super highway, but a speed rail train. So the same way people were against a continental railway, then there will be people who are against some type of major investment in infrastructure spending like that even today, just like there's people against building a wall. So imagine if you can't get people to build a wall, how hard it would be to actually push building a super railway across the nation. Like, fuck it. They're like, oh, we don't got the money. Like, fuck it, make it happen. And they're like, well, we don't have the money. And you're like, I'm not asking for excuses. I'm saying make it happen. And they think that it's, the debate, I guess it can be rigged in some cases, especially when you're talking about race-based legislation like the Anti-Coolie Act, which was against the Chinese at the time. But again, I tell you that it was against the Chinese only from that B1 lens. These were freed black men we're referring to who were going into those contracts and building that railway. And so by circumventing the market and bringing in Chinese, you cheated. That was supposed to be our jobs. You cheated. And so they had to put the tariff on there. And it was like, we'll fine you for $2,000 and throw you in jail for a year if we find that you're working with that other side. And again, the greenback, similar to my conversations on previous live streams, you'll hear me saying that $22 trillion in the form of a Harriet Tubman $20 bill. So similar to this United States $1 on the bottom, this greenback dollar, you would see the Harriet Tubman face on it with a 20 instead of a 1. And I have no problem with that. The same similar bills that we have in circulation today, creating a new one, they create a new one when they determine they want to create a new one. And they print money when they determine that it's necessary to print money, which is why one of the sources from part 1 was the Federal Reserve. You got to know why this interconnected information is important. I'm not just here to be talking. I'm here to give you the facts, and I'm here to have an executive level conversation. It is a global view. I'll show you a map that backs it all the way out, and you can see the population of everything I showed you on that map and the influence of that African or that American descendant of slavery, however you want to put it. All right. Long sentences. Hopefully you're not against that. Hopefully you are not against the long sentences, but the statements have to be made. Pick and choose the audio that you see fits you a little bit and keep it pushing. Pick and choose the audio file that you like, and that small clip can give you the premise of moving forward. So do I want to close with that, or do I actually want to dive in a little bit deeper and tell you what I actually feel about said District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act? See, I didn't give an opinion one way or the other. I just gave you the objective reality. That is the major legislation that was passed. And if you see it in a form of one bill, look at all of those bills that are there, you can definitely see what a blueprint for economic success would look like. While people are saying, well, no, you can't do that, and you're asking for too much, asking for 22 trillion. I say, well, it's still not even asking for enough. That is a very conservative view right there, 22 trillion. That is very conservative in global economics. Don't be a fool. Don't be the person who only wants a cup of mango slices and thinks that's your reparations. Don't be the person who only wants one mango. Don't be the person who wants, a bag of mangoes. Don't be the person that's willing to settle for a mango tree or a mango seed or pack of mango seeds. Don't even be that person that says, I want mango trees in my backyard. Be the person who actually understands when Brother Moses tells you the 40 acre and a mule argument originated from this exact time period. That land was promised. That 40 acres and a mule is a very real concept, because that was the land that was allotted and promised for our wives, our multiple wives, multiple wives. And that is what was needed to sustain not just a war effort, but the creation of a nation, is that labor. You needed your boys to act. You needed multiple 7, 8, 9 boys work in these railroads to be able to compete in economics in a capitalist society. And so by stripping you of your homestead, your land grant, and your ability to produce on a scale of 40 acres rather than from the confines of one own shelter or tent or home. Now, and again, look at that. Even look at that. So I'll go into it. I love the music, man. In fact, I'm going to turn my music up a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of Brother Moses right now. Rock with the kid. Man, be sure to like and subscribe. Hit that bell notification. This is live. This is unscripted. This isn't something that I'm giving you. This is freestyle. Now you see the sources listed because I want you to make sure that you have that information available for you if you're someone who likes to follow up and read for yourself. Some of these names you've seen before, like the Thaddeus Stevens, transcendental idealist, critical role in this era. And all of this is going to be necessary before you can move into the damages. Or there was a contract. Essentially, you want to establish that there was a contract with the government, and thus any failure to execute on that contract is the complicit liability on the federal government. And if there's a federal bank and a Federal Reserve that was a part of that, even militias and all of this Pacific Railroad and the Transcontinental Railroad and legal tender, Department of Agriculture, homesteads, land grants for colleges, military, national banks, revenue. If all of this is in play on your contract, on your bill, on your focus area as a nation, on your blueprint for economic success, if all of this is in focus, then damn it, all of it is in play. If you can see all of this and you can understand that all of this is what a real legitimate agenda looks like, then you can start to ask that question, what does a Black agenda look like? What is your political agenda for the Black community? That's be one way of thinking. And I'm not just going to ask the question, I'm answering the question for you. I'm answering the question just in case you get in a space where you're having to ask that question to somebody and they can't tell you stuff like this. When you have a conversation and somebody's not telling you about the establishment of your own revenue as a people, when they're not telling you that there's going to be a debate about confiscation, especially when you look at the confiscation of our Black bodies all through the 1990s due to marijuana, the confiscation of our sons, confiscation of our cousins, taken right off the streets and thrown in an actual prison, not employed on a national scale that feeds into intercontinental trade. No, thrown into a damn prison, chain gang. Our modern terminology is the prison industrial complex. Now, this is the same thing that they did to us, but at the same time, it was, man, don't make me go in. The damn released prisoners that they gave land to in the same, man, I could jump back to the 1700s and show you the double talk. But if they can't get ready and can't prep your mind for a debate to where when you hear somebody saying anything less than an agenda like this, that you just automatically say, you know what, they're probably not on that level. And you got to water it down. You got to slow it down. Yeah, Nike's is okay. But imagine if, you got to do the imagine if they invested in Nike stock type of conversations because they can't think globally. I mean, that's a good little key takeaway. Everybody's not going to be on this scale, but it's still a watered down conversation. Because you've moved all the way from the authority and that sovereignty. You've moved away from a Black agenda into having the conversation about what ifs and projecting into outcomes when you can see an established precedent for how nations grow their wealth. And this is the petition or that blueprint for success that I'm showing you right here. I'm showing you. I am absolutely showing you, hitting high notes like Mariah. I'm showing you that. Somebody should probably say, Brother Mo, back up in the mic a little bit. You cool, brother? Nah, man. Let the brother speak, man. What I actually want to do is give you a little bit more volume because I feel like I'm dominating. And we're going to jump over. All right, because if I'm going to go in with some music behind it, and y'all just going to have to hate it or love it, man. But we're going to get into this information. So I would ask the chat, how do you feel about the Compensated Emancipation Act? Which side are you on? Because when we have the reparations conversation, they tell us it's not necessary for African or for American descendants of slaves to receive a reparations, when at the same time they compensated those landowners, those folks who own the slaves. So if they granted a reparations for the landowners, and the slave owners, then why not? How is that not double talk? How are you not able to call that out? That is a simple takeaway when you hear people say, well, the reparations thing, and no, I just don't think it, all of that. If you can't come back fire off the top in 1862 District of Columbia Compensated Emancipation Act, then you got to keep watching. That B1 trigger should always hit. That's almost a good one across multiple conversations. It shouldn't be about race and everybody has access to it. Nah, don't run from it. Don't run from reparations. You're trying to tell me blacks don't deserve it while whites actually got it, and that their inheritance through the inheritance tax, they've been able to preserve all the profits and gains from that reparations to this day. Those institutions, private businesses, and owners and shit, they were able to move forward with successful insurance business and banking and steel trade and lumber and construction, and 40 acres goes a long fucking way. And there was no goddamn way you're just gonna wash me under the table with a conversation about motherfucking Nike shoes. Now I know China's manufacturing in China is making those Nike sound good, and so you want us to be able to have that conversation from the lens of going to China and doing business with the Chinese, who can benefit from this shit even all the way back in the 1800s. But you still don't want a nigga to benefit from this shit, and that's why you take the conversation somewhere else. You don't want to talk about how many homes in a Homestead Act could actually be placed on 40 acres. You don't want to have that conversation about how many homes can be placed on 40 acres. You don't want to have that conversation about how many two-story homes can be placed on 40 acres. You don't want to have that conversation, and that's why you water it down. You don't want to talk about Hilton Head. And that's why I try to stay calm, because these niggas is beneath me. We can't have that conversation about motherfucking Nike. We can't talk about Nike because they got a chairperson who's African American, and she is drop dead gorgeous. Chairman of the board. Good night. That sister from JP Morgan, 40 under 40, and I'm almost 40. Man, holla at the kid. Because we can't talk about Nike unless I show you that information. Nike doing something different, man. You don't want to talk about the Anti-Coolie Act, but you want to talk about Nike. You don't even want to talk about Nike. You want to just talk about Colin Kaepernick. That's too small for me, bro. That's too small. It ain't my fault you can't see this deep. It's just not my fault. All of this is black lands. Even before that transatlantic slave trade tried to make it seem like it was all Africans, all of this was inhabited lands. Melanated people were here. They were already here. All of this, everything here. Governance and control comes with a contract, and that contract is over. I see in toe closed. It's our transatlantic slave trade. This was ours, right? Motherfucker, they try to own even the transatlantic slave trade. You try to find a picture, and I bet you they tell you that this picture was owned by. How the fuck do you even own all footage of shit, man? No, this is my picture. Google says this is their picture. They say this is data from LDEO, Columbia, NSF, the NOAA, data SIO, NOAA, the United States Navy, NGA, and GEBCO, Landsat, and Copernicus. That's all the information on what this source is right here for this map. But let's hit the road, because some people can see it from the air. I don't even really gotta fly that fast. So once you get about here, you start to establish the Sherman Reservation. And your 40 acres and a mule. Oh, look at that hot street north. Anyway. Once you get about here, you start to establish the 40 acres, the Sherman's Reservation, the Promised Land. No, the literal, actual Promised Land. Nobody talking that spooky Bible shit. I'm talking about here in America. And we're gonna zoom in right there. Yeah. A gorgeous view interconnecting to that landmass, that main land. Fuck you talking about? That view is gorgeous. This access is phenomenal. You know how often motherfuckers they have land in both this side, and they would definitely do hella business on that other side. But you gotta love Savannah because that is where the actual contract was signed. This is the replacement of Asiento. This is the establishment of our land. It happened right here in Savannah. And just like you'll see in Palestine with the Jews, contended land. It's up to the African Americans to contend for this if y'all want it. If you're talking about Jews or whatever it is, received reparations, it's going to be up to you to determine your Israel. And if you think that your Israel is determining that land over there, you're mistaken. That 40 acres and a mule is right here. This is your major land claim right here that you contend for. If nothing else, this is that major land that you contend for, if nothing else. And that's in your lifetime. That's in our lifetime. Look at that major artery, that gateway into the world. See, that's why shipping and all of that is important, and understanding tariffs and the boats and harbors and ports, all of that shit is important. You got to understand ports to have a conversation. To entertain the conversation, they first have to understand ports. They want to talk about reparations in the form of Nikes and what people might buy and how they would be broke, but they don't want to entertain the conversation from the level of ports and the establishment of ports. This whole sea right here, this whole ring right here is big bank take little bank. It's just a different lens of conversation to have with somebody. It is just a different conversation to have. There are major chunks of the world that can sustain 40 million African Americans should they choose it. And even if they don't choose to actually live in it, it doesn't mean that it's not theirs. And you see, as even from this view, you can see how the land does get carved out and broken into major land tracts. It's all, the work is pretty much done. Right now, there is a name on it, and that name that is actually attached to it as owner is the wrong name. And in order to have that conversation, you're going to have to understand the Confiscation Act. I'll say it again. In order to have that conversation, you're going to have to understand the Confiscation Act. Shit, I'll say it one more time. In order to have that conversation, you have to be ready to have the Confiscation Act. Because they'll tell you, oh, you just recommending that they take the land from the people who own it today. And that's that double talk. And you anticipate that they're going to be double talking. You don't want to just call them racist and say, well, you took the land from the Indians or you took the land from the indigenous people, because now you're getting yourself baited for that trap for it to be about racism. And so the only way to acknowledge that is to say, no, race-based legislation has been proven to have an effective, positive impact in the shaping of our nation. And that's why we have to talk about the Confiscation Act itself. Yeah, it's eminent domain, it occurs, and not the passionate, angry mode of a conversation, but the one that acknowledges it and says, well, look, the major legislation, even in 1862, had a lot, or 1861, had a great deal of controversy embedded in it as well. They were actually taking land and authorizing the taking of land and then granting that land in the name of someone else. And that someone else, in this case, looks like the people that you would see on the screen. I want my name on that land grant. I would not say no to that. It hits the reparations, it hits the law books. Name one motherfucking owner in their right mind who had access to a land grant that said no. And in fact, you're going to have, that's a good question to turn it around on them. Name one of those people who received the land grants, those major businesses and you know, the major industries. Before you even jump there, ask them who were the major industrial icons, something like that. See if they could tell you about the Rockefellers. See if they can tell you about Standard Oil. See if they could tell you anything about the steel families. See if you know the steel and the railroad families, the robber barons. See if they could tell you anything about J.P. Morgan. See if they could tell you anything about the Henry Ford and the Mass Assembly. If they can't tell you anything about those major icons, they don't even know enough about their own people to have the conversation with you. And if they can't see the benefit of being in a position of having that government invest in you and not arrest you for damn near, they was to the gunpoint, get down and lay down defense. They protected them by calling on military men to protect them and affirming them their right to murder. And that's not what we're even asking for. You can give them their walking papers and cash them out. You're the American government. You have the right to that eminent domain clause to where you can say the federal government has declared these public properties or historic properties or whatever it is, name tag that you put on or a transfer. I don't even care about all of that. When somebody forecloses, you can be a part of that arbitration process. That's what you're asking for from the American government. There it is. There's your takeaway. What you're asking for is that arbitration process and the redistribution of those lands back to their rightful owners, which are the American descendants of slavery, based on that contract. Absolutely. It was a death sentence for those other folks. It was absolutely a death sentence. But this is the most peaceful way of going about it. Now, we know in history that they weren't so peaceful about that, though. We know who errs on the sides of the murder. That wasn't us. We got some episodes in our history where brothers fought back, protected themselves. And as you see, numbers may have gotten rocked significantly. Numbers got rocked significantly. But we have survivors. And their bloodline survived. No, don't take it out of context as if I'm saying we have people who are still alive to this day, but no, we survived. We're still here. Our DNA strands are still just as rich and as ripe and as strong as they were even then. Even despite all the GMOs and crossbreeding and miscegenation and all of that extra other shit that dilutes the strand, we got some strong strands of DNA that are still right there. We still here. Took a hell of a hit, though, I promise you. If you look at the population based on their numbers. Now, again, we're still asking for those Negro journals to actually include the mathematics. You got to get the mathematics, and that's what the basic premise is. That is still the basic premise to this very day is what is the mathematics? You cannot write off that study. Don't write off the bill HR 40. Don't write off the study that actually gets that database with all the real numbers. And for the next generations, they can pull their pivot tables and they could look at it from, a number of different lenses. For instance, show me the incarceration of every African American from 1861 to this day. Show me the record in America. Show me, here's another one. Show me every business started by an African American since 1861 to this day. Show me, you can ask for specific data, specifics, but you have to first get that compilated data set together, which is a consolidation act is what you're actually asking for, an information or data, whatever it is, and you got to have it. And you would think that they already have the digital copies in many of these libraries, but they're still making the investments to do so. In this case, digitizing that Daughters of the Confederate, if they don't just burn it. Some of them definitely love to burn the shit before they make it available. But yeah, there's definitely some context around that you have to visit. They told them in this Compensation Act, I will give you $300 each. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33. Looks like there may have been somebody on this side too, but we'll stop at around 3,500 just for this small section. Now imagine a 40-acre plantation And even if you go by what that old context said, I think Tariq was brought up on charges from a lot of the women for saying, you know, the married man, head of household, something like that. The married man, head of household. That's 40 acres. Who else? Maybe this one, 40 acres. Maybe this one, I don't even know if that's man or woman, another 40 acres. But even that is worth the conversation. Anyway, any of these folks could have descendants. You could be connected to any of those descendants, and being connected to any of those descendants then attaches you to that data, and why that data is important for you, being able to quantify what that claim looks like. You're like, you're a descendant of slave. No, I'm a descendant of many. Check back in the back chat. What up, Brother George? Damn, man, I had to go in for a second. Now I'm done. I didn't even mean for it to go so long, but I appreciate anybody that joined and rocked in that chat. I had to get that shit off my chest right there, man. And so, as you know, if you're familiar with the maps and anything like that, I would have to zoom out. But even from there, you got a long way north to get to DC. And so if all of these lands, as you're flying over, which I technically could right now since we do have that aerial view, all of these lands are the acreage and acreage and acreage of land grants. And those are the land grants with your forebears' names on it. Remember, I am still in just that reserve, the Sherman Reserve. I am still in the 40 acres. I'm not looking at the rest of the world right now in this rear view. I am still just looking at the land that was actually promised. When people talk about the Jews and Israel or Palestine and all the foreign aid that we give to them, and they got the ability to send rockets to the moon now because of their benefactor, or because being declared the benefactor or the beneficiary of said. Ooh, look at that. All that right there. All that. Yacht Club. That's what I'm telling you. You got to have GPS coordinates, man. Rock with me. I'm trying to zoom that bad boy as good as it can give me. I'm thinking the Google Maps rather than the Google Earth would probably give me a better oh no, yeah, it's zooming in the best it can, but it might give me the better view of what that land actually looks like. Orange Grove, mangoes, that's what I'm talking about. Don't be the guy that just wants one mango, man, or a couple mangoes, man. Think bigger. Think 40 acres, and that's per head of household. If they say it like that, that's man. Even if that was the worst case scenario, it at least get the conversation going. But understand what 40 acres actually looks like before you having that conversation from a lesser space. Understand what you're actually turning down when you say, no, I don't think that reparations would be. If you're an African American saying reparations, no. Look, it looked like somebody carved their whole footprint, like a giant stepped right here. You see that? Like a giant put his whole footprint right there, his whole footprint in that land right there. And that's why you would need legislation such as the Department of Agriculture. I'll show you. Couldn't trade screens fast enough, but yeah. So this is from like a bird. This is the people from taking the camera with them on the ground. You're going to need like a drone or something to take the picture from up here. You're going to need a drone to see how much 40 acres actually looks like and how that is. And so the African American who says, yeah, no, I'm not for reparations. And that's in fact what you won't get. It's just like those people who take the conversation to, I'm not saying that we're not owed reparations. I'm saying, we won't get it, or you're asking them, or you're begging, or all of that extra other bullshit. And so they're deflecting from the conversation, or they're outright dismissing it as, well, they'll just be broke. You know, they'll be broke the very next week. And so they'd rather have that conversation than to actually take an account for what reparations actually is, or what that 40 acres conversation, what it really is. This is what it really is. And they may not get to that conversation, but I'm going to show you, because I'm Brother Moses and I'm B1 as far. I'm going to actually give you the real facts. Who gonna be able to dispute that fact right there? Who gonna have anything to say about that? What is there anybody in the chat? So they can talk, they buy Nikes and they'll pay off their car loan or their cell phone bills, and they gonna get a Cadillac or something stupid like that's what they want you to talk about. That's very comedic. Haha. I think the shit's hilarious. I could only laugh at somebody who thinks that small, because they can't see the bigger picture. I need my damn mule, goddamn you. They think I'm talking about an animal. I live in a modern era. I know what a mule is. A big ass, super fast car on steel that moves whatever I decide to grow from this motherfucker all the way to California. That's my mule. It's a whole goddamn speed bullet train, motherfucker. I don't play no damn games. If you want to that you can see if you look all the way in, rather than focusing on how many of these homes could you actually fit in a 40-acre spot. Man, don't talk to Brother Mo about it, man. I'm too deep, man. I'll kill your dreams. I'll make you think that now that you see it from this lens, you'll understand why they're willing to die rather than pay a nigga. Oh, no, that's what they're afraid of. That's sovereignty. And that's a conversation you can have with a Hebrew Israelite. Man, have you ever seen a map of what 40 acres looks like from the sky? Now tell me, are you against that promised land? What do you really believe in the promised land? Why are you talking about the promised land only in the sense of it's a biblical narrative, rather than talking about the 40 acres and the mule that's even here? Do you even use that in your conversations, or are you just 501c3 and you can't talk about politics? Now, this ain't politics. This is economics, family. It ain't my fault that they didn't know how to turn this water into wine. It ain't my fault that they saw it as being swampland or less beautiful. Now, this land is motherfucking clean. That shit is very clean. Ain't no way I would say, nah, that's not mine, or I wouldn't want it. And it being this clean shows you the actual potential. It being already mapped out and grid locked out shows you what the development can actually look like. Like that's build ready. That is shovel ready. That is a shovel ready port if I've ever seen one. The rest of the conversations get nowhere with me. That's shovel ready. And that's just one section of the Sherman Reservation. I've shown you it from far, far, far away, which I'm trying to zoom out again. But when you zoom in and look at that land, there is no way that the bill, you shouldn't be 100% on board with saying absolute yes. And if they have nothing else to say that this is what we're asking for, they got to be able to look at this footage and have this conversation, or they got to be able to look at this conversation and create their own narrative around something that looks just like this. Just like this. Oh, no, I wouldn't know what to do with this. Bullshit. Every alligator hunted in that motherfucker is yours. Some nasty ass fish types, but they're yours. Shit, if you want to start your own motherfucking fishery or whatever that shit is, and do the rice cultivating, do what you want, nigga, it's yours. See, you remember in one of my previous presentations, if you've rocked with me, the Fripp Pleasant Plantation. Show you what it looked like today, bro. I told you I was gonna get him, Brother George Macon. I told you I was gonna get him, bro. I'll show you that it's connected even to the Jenkins name, and that'll really hurt him. After watching that presentation, and you know where I'm at, and you know the insurance and the cosign and all of that, there's no way that you would say, nah, we don't, no reparations. I'm fit to show you. I don't play them games. We legit got work to do. Look at this beautiful strip mapped out. All right, man, more or less, more of the same. It's been about that hour mark. I'm actually done right here. I'm going to play around on the camera just a little bit longer. Feel free to rock with it. I may speak openly, but I'm pretty much done with the Confiscation Act. You know it goes. It was D.C. And so again, those people, they were the ones. If you're looking at generals and the major landowners, they own hundreds, if not thousands, of acres. Not just the 40. They own the thousands of acres. So an entire development of theirs would look like a strip like this. So that's what I like to look into. That's what I'm interested in. B1 Network, we deliver content. Thanks for joining, Brother Moses. This joint and holy crap, man. And a damn mule. StreamYard not responding. Of course not. Oh, computer not responding. Time for an upgrade.